Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I am your host as always, Professor Prime. And welcome back to my Math in the World series, a series where I talk about different things. These things could include different academic subjects. They could include different professional fields. They could include different interests of mine, different interests of other people. They could include franchises. They could include sports. They can include any number of things. The whole point is to say that math is everywhere and in everything, and I dive into why that is and how that is. And I've been having an absolute blast with it. And so, with this particular video, I'm going to talk about math and dance. For me, both are important in our everyday lives, and they're actually, I think, both similar in some ways. And I want to talk about that. And then I want to focus in and talk about how math is used directly in dance. And I also want to talk about some things surrounding all of what I just said, and then talk about things on a more meta level. So that's what I want to do, and I look forward to it. To start, I wanted to talk about what is dance, right? I feel like there are several different definitions you can go off of, but for me, if I had to kind of put it together right now, I'd say some of the things that I've seen out there are kind of restrictive, and I would classify it as it's movement that is usually rhythmic in nature, that has a sort of flow to it. It could be with music, but it doesn't have to be. And I feel like it's a way of communicating, and that there's just so many options that you have to explore with that, and I think that's pretty cool because you could have something that's theatrical and more directly telling a story, or you could just be dancing on your own or dancing with some friends. It's fulfilling a purpose. It has a reason for existing, and I feel like in all those cases, when you are dancing, you're communicating something. And furthermore, kind of going back to what it is, I feel like it is that rhythmic sort of moving, typically with a set amount of movements for whatever dance that you're doing. And I feel like that's pretty cool. And then to jump over to math, I've said this in a lot of other videos, so I'll try not to belabor my point, but I think it's worth bringing up because you don't know who's watching your video for the first time. And also, I just think it's a good thing to bring up, and it's this: math is also about communication, and we use it in our everyday lives just like the dance. And I feel like the whole thing with math is we do have what we see in the classroom, we have arithmetic, algebra, calculus, and so on and so forth. And then we have math in a broader context that I feel happens whether we learn this or that in school. Because what we learn in school is a way for us to communicate further about stuff that we already do. So I feel like when it comes to math, we are natural mathematicians. We're doing it whether we're talking about algebra or not. But algebra is the language that we decide to speak about a lot of things in. And we are communicating something about the past, the present, or the future. We're saying something. And I feel like the same can be said for dance, which is what I was getting at earlier, right? And so then that's how I feel like they're similar. They're ultimately about communication. And I'd argue that there's a flow to all of it. Right. And in a minute, I'm going to talk about math and dance directly, but I will say one more thing about the similarities that I think is interesting, and it's about that flow. So I think with math, when we start coming up with rules and we start defining this and we start defining that, right? It all has a purpose. It all has a logic to it, right? And I feel like if we didn't have those things, the universe will still flow as it is. The math will still happen. We just find a way to talk about it. And then with dance, I feel there's a lot of things that are choreographed out there, and it has a certain flow to it too, and it's communicating something, and usually a little bit more directly. But sometimes when we're dancing on our own, we don't have a set choreography. We're just kind of doing our thing, but we're still communicating something with that. So the dancing happens whether it's highly choreographed or not, and I think that's pretty cool. But to kind of dive in a little bit more and talk about how math is used in dancing, it comes down to several different things, right? I feel like one of the biggest things is the motion itself. When you're dancing, that motion has a lot of math in it, just on a physics level. And I think that's pretty cool. But then I'd argue that you can dissect things a little further because, yes, you can talk about the physics of things. You can talk about your motion, and that alone has a lot of math in it. But you could also say that the number of movements that you're doing in a set, the choreography behind your dancing, that all has math in it. If you're dancing and you're doing a particular kind of motion, there's a certain geometry to what you're doing and like any shape that you might make while dancing, you know? There's an order to it, there's a logic to it, and I think that's pretty cool. So if I had to kind of sum it up real quick, I'd say there's math in your movement, both in the physics behind it and the geometry behind it, so to speak. There's probably a better way to say that, but that's what I'm kind of going on with right now. And then there's like, you know, just math in the setup. There's math in the choreography. Well, like how many steps are you taking? When are you taking the steps? Or about like how far apart do you have to be? And then it's just like to add to it, you know, you can think about things on a solo level because you can dance by yourself, and that is okay. Or you could dance with a partner, or you could dance with a group. And in all those cases, you know, there's things that change with that, things that you can figure out, and there's a logic to all of that. And there's a lot of math in all that, from the motions to the choreography to the steps that you're taking to the like shapes that you're making when you're doing it. And I think that's all beautiful. And so it's not something that we normally think about, but yeah, there's a lot of math in dance. And with dance in general, it's so cool because it's used, you know, every day. It's one of those things where, you know, we didn't invent it. We do it, but we didn't invent it. Animals dance as well. And I think that's pretty cool. So dance was going to happen whether we came along or not, whether we like developed elaborate choreographies or not. And I think that's worth mentioning. And I feel like it's the same thing with math. Where math exists, we didn't invent it. We just kind of created the choreography for it. And I think that's pretty cool. Or like we paid attention to like the choreography out there and try to communicate that to others. And then it's just like, so I've been just talking about like math and dancing with just dancing, right? But if you're dancing with music, that adds another layer to it, right? Because you have the rhythm of your body, you have the moves that you're making, but you also have the rhythm of the music. And then if you're someone who's doing something professionally, you know, you'd probably go out of your way to match your movements with the music, especially if you were trying to convey a specific kind of message or try to create a certain kind of atmosphere. But if you are just on your own, yes, you might do that directly, but you could respond to certain music. You might move a certain way, so you might be still doing that math without, you know, meaning to. You know, so you might hear a certain song, you might move a certain way, and I think that's pretty cool. And there's so much different types of dance like out there, right? So many different type of dancing that exists, and all of it has math. And I think whether you're doing ballroom dancing, break dancing, or you know a lot of other dancing out there, it's intricate. It has logic, it has flow, it has math. I can't stress that enough. And I think it's pretty cool. And then when you look at it on a meta level, right? You know, I think it's kind of interesting that when it comes to math, it exists outside of us, and you know we're just making sense of it. But we see other creatures doing and using that. And then when dance, it's the same thing, and you know we're trying to communicate, we're trying to do something, and I think that part's cool in the meta like sort of text. But what I also think is interesting is, and you all, if you've seen some of my other videos, you might have noticed this coming, but the money aspect, because you know, math and money, it's a thing. So then when you look at that in dance, there's a lot of different ways you can go, right? So one, you could be a professional dancer, and so you're making money with that. And in a lot of cases, it's something that you most likely spent your life on, right? Developing your skills, developing your choreography, developing your flow. There's a lot of different ways you can go with that. So you could be a dancer, you could be a choreographer, you could be both. And either way, you spent a lot of time training. And, you know, there's math in that. There's math in the money that it takes to do set training too, because maybe you went to a certain school, maybe you took certain classes, and that all adds up. So you're putting an investment in, and then you're going out there and you're doing your thing. And then you could be like a multifaceted artist, because maybe you choreograph, maybe you dance, maybe you make some music on your own, and so you're like tying it all together from that end. And maybe you do choreography for some other people. Maybe you were making music for some other people. It all like kind of adds up. And if you are on the music making end, you know, you might be making stuff for you, or you might have a particular audience in mind. You might be doing a particular genre, but I think it's interesting that you could go and you can make a song specifically with dance in mind. And sometimes this can come in the form of like literally making a dance for the song that you're in, or making it a certain kind of way, because like maybe you want your music to like be played in a club, you want people to dance to it, so you have something that's like very rhythmic in nature, you have something that like people can get into, they can move to. And I think it's interesting because you could go off of like data that you've seen before in that, or you can kind of go on your own like musical know-how. Like maybe you're listening and you're like, okay, I'm naturally bobbing along with that, and so you're doing math behind that. And then sometimes it's kind of like you're feeling it out, but then some people like strategically do it, you know. And I think that's pretty cool. They might count this or that out. Like they might count how many beats are going on, and it's like, well, hey, can people comfortably move to this? And I think that's fascinating. And like a lot of that could be motivated by what the artist wants to do, but a lot of it could be motivated by money, because if you're making a song, you say, hey, is this going to get play? Is it going to get play on the radio? Is it going to get play in the clubs? Is it going to be something that people bop to? And I think that's all interesting, because you can't have anything in this world, I feel, without talking about money. But you can certainly make a lot of money with dance, and I think that's pretty cool. And it just like it works itself into like pretty much every medium we see. Because yes, there's the music genre itself, but you see dancing and a lot of different things, right? Like you see it in TV, you see it in the movies, and sometimes you see like shows or movies that are outright about dance, that don't just feature it, but that's the whole point. And you even see that in books, right? You see people dancing, people bonding over that, people saying something with it. And I think that's all cool. You even see it in games. You might have like a dance scene here or there, but you might also have something where dancing is the focus, just like in those other mediums. Like there's plenty of dance games out there. There's plenty of rhythm-based games out there, and I think that's all cool. And I also think that there's a lot of math in all that, because then when you get into the games, you got all the coding and a lot of precision involved with what you want to do, and I think that's pretty cool. And you could talk about that all day, really. And so, yeah, I don't want this to get too long, but I just wanted to say that dance, I think, is very important. It's a form of communication, a form of expression, and I argue the same with math. And then, like I was saying earlier, for all the reasons that I said, there's a lot of math in dance. So I think that's amazing. And in both cases, like we didn't invent either of those things. We just found ways to talk about them. We just found ways to develop them more, to like make them a big part of our society. And I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, if you're a dancer, you're a mathematician. And I argue, if you're a mathematician, you're also a dancer. Because, when you're on that page and you're doing this and you're doing that, oh yeah, there's rhythm to that. There's a fine dance with it. And I think that's all amazing. And real quick, before I do go, I think it's also cool that there's a lot of other forms of human movement that are, related to dance, and we don't always think about that. And I think one of my favorite ones is like martial arts, especially if you're watching a martial arts film. And it's not uncommon that people train in dance and martial arts if they're like in that line of work. And I think that's pretty cool. Like, if you're in the movies and stuff like that. And I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, so math and dance. I hope you walked away with a different perspective. I hope that you found this interesting. I hope that you find math less intimidating. And I honestly hope you see a bit more of the math and the dance when you do it. So, that being said, Professor Prime out.